In the years following the war, entire regions of Europe seemed haunted not by ghosts, but by the weight of sealed files and vanished names. Military reports redacted into oblivion, ships that left no wake, broadcasts that never reached their listeners. Beneath the official histories, those clean lines of victories and defeats, lay a deeper hidden record, one of erased operations, unacknowledged alliances, and scientific pursuits that blurred the boundaries of morality and madness. From the frozen harbors of the Baltic to the silent bunkers of the Alps, a buried network of secrets waited patiently beneath layers of ash and archive dust, whispering of the war that never truly ended. Chapter 1: The Ghost Convoy of the Baltic Sea. In January 1945, as the Soviet Second Belarusian Front swept westward toward Königsberg, the Baltic became a graveyard of steel. The German Navy, desperate to evacuate civilians and personnel, launched a massive maritime exodus under Operation Hannibal. Among the thousands of documented vessels was a small, unlisted convoy, operating under a different directive, coded Eisenwind. No mention of it exists in Kriegsmarine command logs or the Kriegstagebuch, yet references appear in scattered intercepts from Bletchley Park and fragmentary post-war testimonies from merchant officers. Eisenwind was said to consist of 3 freighters, SS Lothringen, SS Freya, and SS Norn, as well as 2 torpedo boats providing silent escort. Their route from Pillau toward Kiel was scheduled for January 28, 1945. None of the ships reached port. Survivors from other convoys reported seeing a formation, moving without lights through sleet and low fog. Near the Gulf of Danzig, they described muffled engines, minimal radio contact, and strict blackout discipline. Soviet submarine records later claimed responsibility for multiple sinkings that week, yet none matched Eisenwind's configuration or reported tonnage. What these freighters carried has been the subject of whispered speculation within naval archives for decades. The most persistent theory, supported by fragments found in 1951 NATO divers' logs, suggests the ships bore not refugees but dismantled reactor prototypes from Königsberg's abandoned SS research facilities. The crates were labeled with ambiguous technical markings, Versuchsgerät 3A and Energiekammertyp B, terms never associated with known German naval equipment. In 1951, during a British-Norwegian joint diving operation off Bornholm, fragments of pressure casings and melted shielding material were recovered at depths exceeding 70 meters. The official report classified the debris as non-critical metallurgical remains, but an internal memo from Lieutenant Commander Edward Clark, declassified decades later under FOIA Request 92774, noted traces of isotopic contamination inconsistent with maritime fuel or munitions. The memo mentioned dense cylindrical shielding units containing glass-like residue. After this discovery, the dive logs abruptly ceased and Operation Vellum, a covert Anglo-American salvage project, was initiated under NATO Directive Stan 112-51. The mission's stated purpose was environmental hazard assessment, yet the recovered material was airlifted to Portsmouth and later transferred under US custody to an unidentified facility in Nevada. Archival references to Eisenwind vanish almost entirely after 1952, replaced by vague correspondence between British Admiralty and US Navy intelligence concerning non-recoverable scientific freight. One line in a heavily redacted message, dated March 12, 1952, reads, "Priority relocation complete. Containment verified. Further Baltic recovery suspended indefinitely." Historians attempting to trace the convoy's personnel discovered that the ship's manifests, once stored at the Deutsche Schifffahrtsarchiv, were destroyed in a mysterious 1960 warehouse fire in Bremen. The fire consumed over 40,000 documents, but the loss of the Eisenwind files was noted in a marginal annotation by an archivist. Request for duplication denied. Foreign custody confirmed. The only first-hand account linked to the convoy came from a Baltic fisherman, Piotr Grudzinski, interviewed by East German Radio in 1968. He described finding a lifeboat adrift near the Danish island of Christiansø in the spring of 1945. Inside lay a German officer in full naval uniform, dead from exposure with his papers removed and a brass tag marked BA213. Grudzinski said the tag was later confiscated by local authorities. Decades later, a retired Soviet signals officer, Yuri Markov, corroborated that his listening post in Kaliningrad intercepted unusual radio silence patterns in late January 1945. There were ships out there, he recalled, but they did not answer to any call signs. They moved as if already ghosts. In the 1990s, when NATO archives began releasing select Cold War material, an obscure entry surfaced in the index of the Royal Navy's technical branch. Vellum, Baltic Retrieval of Anomalous Apparatus, 1951-1952, joint with USAF. The accompanying pages were withheld under National Security Clause 34-2, though researchers who briefly accessed the microfilm described schematics resembling containment flasks and energy conversion turbines. One blurred diagram bore a stamped insignia of the SS Ahnenerbe Institute, long rumoured to have sponsored pseudo-scientific energy research late in the war. The possible implication that Eisenwind carried early nuclear or electromagnetic technology remains officially unacknowledged. Yet the US Department of Energy lists several imported experimental energy assemblies acquired from foreign post-war sources under a 1953 memorandum signed by Secretary Charles E. Wilson, matching the Eisenwind timeline. The origin fields are redacted. In 2008, a privately funded diving expedition led by maritime historian Dr. Anja Keller located metallic wreckage 20 nautical miles southeast of Bornholm. The sonar images revealed the outline of a cargo ship consistent with a 1940s German freighter. When Keller's team sent an unmanned ROV into the site, its cameras recorded what appeared to be lead-encased containers resting on the seabed, but within hours, the feed cut to static. 2 days later, the Danish Maritime Authority abruptly revoked the expedition's license, citing military jurisdiction. Dr. Keller's remaining footage was seized under a NATO compliance order, and she has not publicly spoken since. What little is known today comes from scattered references in surviving correspondence. A declassified Admiralty note dated September 5, 1954, marked "Secret for Eyes Only," reads, "Eisenwind material integrated per vellum. No further Baltic operations authorized. Maintain cover narrative. Lost to Soviet action." The phrasing, particularly integrated, suggests successful recovery, not destruction. In 2013, a whistleblower within the Bundesarchiv leaked a digital index entry labeled Eisenwind, nicht für Veröffentlichung, do not publish. The file's metadata included GPS coordinates corresponding roughly to the Bornholm Trench. German authorities quickly removed the document, claiming data corruption, but cached versions circulated briefly online before deletion. Researchers noted cross-references to Königsberg, Energiewerkstatt, and SS Technikreferat, Kammler, both connected to late-war experimental power research divisions. The Baltic remains one of the most treacherous and least explored maritime environments in Europe. Thousands of wrecks lie beneath its cold surface, most harmless relics of war, others perhaps not. Fishermen occasionally report anomalous readings, magnetic interference, and localized dead zones where compasses spin erratically. The Polish Maritime Office attributes these to residual ordnance and iron concentrations. Yet in classified NATO environmental surveys from 1974, a restricted section labeled Bornholm Deep Sector 9 carries a stark warning: high-level containment present. Do not disturb sediment layers. No one can confirm what Eisenwind truly carried, nor what became of the men aboard. No graves were found, no survivors identified. The convoy remains unlisted in German naval records, unacknowledged in Allied reports, and unaccounted for in Soviet claims. 3 ships departed Pillau under secrecy orders. 3 names erased from history, but the sea does not forget. Beneath the grey water and layers of silt, the cold metal waits, its secrets sealed, its silence absolute. Whether it was a lost evacuation, a transport of scientific relics, or a final attempt by a dying regime to hide the unthinkable, Eisenwind endures as one of the Baltic's most enduring mysteries. In the end, all that remains is a single entry scrawled in an old intelligence ledger recovered from a British archive basement. Convoy Eisenwind, cargo secured, subject classified beyond 100 years. Chapter 2, Operation Harlequin, the vanished unit in the Ardennes. The first snow began falling over the Ardennes on December 14, 1944. For the soldiers stationed along the Belgian border, it felt like a lull. Another grey winter of holding ground and counting rations. Yet within the command post of the 99th Infantry Division, a new and inexplicably urgent order was transmitted through encrypted field channels. The directive, labelled Field Order 2117B, was marked for special reconnaissance deployment. No public record. A small detachment of 13 men, officially part of the division's intelligence and reconnaissance platoon, were reassigned under temporary command of Lieutenant Charles M. Harlequin, a name that appears nowhere else in US Army rosters or subsequent personnel files. The mission's briefing, reconstructed decades later from partial radio transcripts and diary fragments, instructed the unit to move east of Crinkle Roshrath, deep into enemy-held forest. Their objective: intercept and evaluate unidentified Axis radio transmissions operating on unconventional frequencies. The order carried the authorization signature of Colonel David E. Pike, G2 Operations, though the document itself was later found missing from divisional archives. The men departed before dawn on December 16th, just hours before the German counteroffensive began, what history now knows as the Battle of the Bulge. They would never return. Surviving units reported hearing static-filled transmissions emanating from the direction of the Harlequin patrol, distorted bursts of Morse code that did not match standard Allied or German patterns. Forward observers claimed to have seen faint blue flashes deep within the fog-bound tree line near Losheimer Graben. When a follow-up patrol attempted to trace the signal 2 days later, they found no camp, no equipment, only shallow impressions in the snow where tents might have stood. The area had not yet been reached by German armor, and no signs of engagement were visible. The men of Operation Harlequin had vanished without a trace. After the war, official investigation was perfunctory. The Army's Missing Personnel Division filed the case under standard MIA classification. Yet in 1952, the US Army Counterintelligence Corps reopened the file after decryption experts discovered a curious anomaly in captured German radio logs. Wehrmacht listening stations along the Siegfried Line had recorded unknown English transmissions between December 16th and 19th, 1944, operating from coordinates consistent with the missing unit's route. The messages referenced non-existent call signs and made repeated mention of mirror point, a code name absent from Allied cipher libraries. German operators believed the broadcasts to be Allied psychological warfare, but an appended note handwritten by a German signals officer reads, "Voices distorted, could not determine origin, suspected mechanical interference." The reopened investigation revealed further irregularities. Letters sent to the families of the missing soldiers were all typed on identical Underwood No. 5 machines, each bearing the same faint misalignment in the letter. Every letter was signed by Lieutenant C.M. Harlequin, yet document analysts later proved that none of the correspondence originated from official military offices. When the FBI examined the typeface in 1961, they concluded that the letters were produced after the war using untraceable stationery. One widow, Margaret Dorsey, received her letter postmarked from a military field post number that had been decommissioned in January 1945. The envelope carried no return address. In 1973, an archivist named Henry Lowell uncovered a half-burned folder labeled Operation Redfield in a Washington storage facility slated for clearance. Inside were memoranda from Army Signal Corps engineers discussing field tests of narrowband jamming prototypes derived from enemy technology. Location: Ardennes sector. One of the attached pages bore the phrase Harlequin Team Field Validation. The equipment described, portable shortwave amplifiers with phase modulation, did not exist in Allied inventories until the 1950s. This led to speculation that the Harlequin unit had been part of an experimental trial involving captured German communications devices, possibly from Peenemunder's electronics division. But if so, why was the operation concealed under falsified personnel rosters? British Intercept archives at Bletchley Park contained a single relevant reference: a fragmentary decrypted message from the US 12th Army Group to Supreme Headquarters, marked Ultra Confidential, dated December 17, 1944. It reads, "Harlequin field assets inoperative, possible compromise. Cease all corresponding frequencies immediately." The cable was never distributed beyond the immediate cipher room, and its original sender's identity remains redacted. Eyewitness accounts add a chilling dimension. In a 1984 oral history project, retired Belgian forester Emile van Gerwen recalled encountering American soldiers with blank patches, moving silently through the snow near Bühlingen. They carried radio packs, but no visible unit insignia. When questioned, one replied only, "Signal Corps, temporary assignment." 2 days later, Van Gerwen returned to the area after shelling had subsided. He found scraps of radio wire tangled in tree branches and a canvas satchel containing a metallic object resembling a miniature oscillator. The satchel bore a tag labeled US Property, Recovered Equipment, 12/18/44. The item vanished after being handed to local authorities. By the late Cold War, Operation Harlequin had become a footnote in obscure military research circles. In 1998, declassified CIA briefings revealed that prototypes of passive frequency jamming nodes, used extensively in Korea and early Vietnam operations, had ancestral field testing under Project Redfield. 1944-1945. Several internal memos cross-referenced Harlequin Field Group, Ardennes Sector. None of the recovered devices survive, nor do technical drawings. Only grainy microfilm copies showing conical receivers attached to backpack frames. The documents suggest that Harlequin's purpose was to intercept, not transmit, monitoring electromagnetic phenomena on frequencies known to interfere with both Allied and Axis radio systems. One historian, Dr. Caroline Mercer, who examined the Redfield microfilm in 2004, described it as a program probing the limits of signal intelligence beyond radio, towards something atmospheric. Her notes reference a missing addendum titled Mirror Point Correlation Tests, Ardennes, 1944. The addendum, according to the index, was withdrawn by the US Air Force in 1957 and transferred to a facility in Dayton, Ohio. When Mercer requested access, her inquiry was denied on grounds of ongoing national security relevance. The fate of the 13 men remains officially unresolved. No bodies were recovered. Their service numbers appear correctly on wartime rosters until December 16th, then vanish. The unit's payroll ended abruptly that same week. In 1979, a fragment of a dog tag belonging to Corporal James Wilcox, one of the Harlequin men, was unearthed during Belgian forestry work near Elsenborn Ridge. The tag's reverse side, however, bore an engraved number inconsistent with Army format, MP314. Analysts speculate this could stand for mirror point. The artifact was catalogued, then removed by unidentified US personnel 2 days later. Perhaps the most disturbing discovery came in 2009, when a cache of unmarked signal tapes surfaced in a private collection in Stuttgart. The reels, recorded on wartime wire spools, contained distorted transmissions resembling human speech buried under mechanical hum. When played at half speed, several phrases emerge in broken English. References to field mirror, lost cycle, and return to base not acknowledged. Audio forensics confirmed the material's age and magnetic composition consistent with 1940s US Signal Corps wire. The provenance of the reels is unknown. Within months of their appearance online, the files were removed by order of the US Defense Media Agency. Every trace of Operation Harlequin leads into fog, just as it began. What started as a small reconnaissance mission became a phantom entry in military history, surrounded by altered documents and unacknowledged technology. If the men were victims of experimental testing gone wrong, their story remains buried beneath redactions and silence. If, as some theorists suggest, they stumbled upon an enemy signal source neither side understood, their disappearance may have been the deliberate erasure of an inconvenient truth. In the forest east of Krinkelt, local hikers still find fragments of insulated wire embedded in the roots of old pines. The ground remains uneven, scarred by frost and time. Every few winters, when the snow lies just right, faint radio interference can be picked up on shortwave sets near Losheimer Graben, a rhythmic static, pulsing at intervals of 13. A coincidence, perhaps, or the final echo of voices that went out into the frozen dark, waiting for a reply that would never come. Chapter 3. The Siberian Files of Unit 47. In the aftermath of Germany's surrender in May 1945, trains began moving quietly eastward across the scorched plains of Poland and into Soviet territory. These were not prisoner transports nor victory shipments. They bore the black-marked crates of confiscated German research, seized by Red Army technical units under the supervision of the NKVD's 9th Directorate. Their destination, a place recorded in Soviet manifests only as Zone 47. It lay somewhere beyond the Yenisei River, deep within the desolate Tunguska region, where the taiga swallowed all signs of intrusion. According to later testimonies, this was the establishment site for Operation Morgenstern, a top-secret initiative sanctioned by Stalin himself to absorb and continue the Reich's unfinished scientific programs. What emerged from this operation would become one of the most carefully guarded mysteries of the early Cold War. The first references to Unit 47 appeared in a set of Soviet industrial reports dated October 1946. The documents mention a special physics detachment attached to the second main directorate of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The unit's stated purpose was the evaluation of foreign energy apparatus of high volatility and unclassified radiation. None of the engineers assigned to the project were listed in civilian rosters. The site, known locally by forced laborers as Ozyorsk 17, was constructed under brutal conditions. Barracks, a testing field, and a concrete bunker complex built into the permafrost. Rail shipments arrived under the escort of Smersh officers. Each train carried equipment looted from former German installations, lead-shielded containers, disassembled rotors, and half-melted turbines. Most crates bore markings from the SS Reichsministerium für Bewaffnung, Ministry of Armaments. Inside one crate recovered decades later were glass vials labeled Königsberg Serie D. By 1947, correspondence between Moscow and the site's commandant, Major Andrei Koltsov, revealed an escalating series of containment issues. In one surviving telegram, Koltsov reported radiological emissions inconsistent with known isotopes. Another message referred to intermittent energy discharges, observed nocturnally as vertical plasma columns. Western intelligence would later obtain satellite images showing scorched terrain patterns eerily similar to those found near the 1908 Tunguska impact site, suggesting either an experiment or a detonation. The terrain around Zone 47 was cordoned off and erased from subsequent maps. Soviet logbooks make cryptic reference to Stabilization Phase 4, followed by the abrupt recall of personnel. Most were transferred to atomic research centers in Arzamas 16. Others, including Koltsov himself, were reassigned without forwarding information. No records show them again. For decades, Unit 47 existed only in rumor. That changed in 1979, when KGB defector Oleg Zakharov crossed into Austria carrying a packet of photographic negatives and partial transcripts. He claimed they came from File U-47, a classified dossier documenting post-war German technological integration. The negatives displayed cylindrical devices suspended by steel cables within ice-crusted pits, surrounded by armed guards. Zakharov described them as gravity batteries, powered not by fissile material but by magnetic induction loops derived from experimental blueprints found in Berlin in 1945. Western analysts dismissed the claim as defection propaganda, yet the detail in his descriptions, specific voltage ratings, apparatus dimensions, and serial numbers, aligned with surviving Nazi engineering documentation seized from Peenemünde and Prague. Zakharov's photographs, grainy but distinct, bore the official seal of the Soviet Ninth Directorate. When questioned by CIA handlers in Vienna, Zakharov spoke of a catastrophic test conducted in February 1949. According to his account, Unit 47 attempted to activate one of the captured devices under the supervision of Colonel Viktor Alexeyev, a physicist from the Moscow Engineering Institute. The test site, located near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River, experienced a luminous event lasting approximately 8 seconds. Instruments recorded spikes in both radiation and magnetism, followed by what witnesses described as an invisible shockwave. Several technicians were reportedly killed instantly. Their bodies showed signs of severe internal trauma without external burns. The device was subsequently entombed in reinforced concrete. Zakharov's report suggested that the incident led to the permanent closure of the facility under direct order from Lavrenti Beria. Western analysts were divided. Some dismissed Zakharov's claims as embellished Cold War disinformation designed to inflate the Soviet scientific mystique. Yet American reconnaissance flights over central Siberia in the 1950s did record unusual electromagnetic interference zones, forcing U-2 aircraft to alter their course. In one CIA field memo dated June 3, 1958, a reconnaissance officer wrote, "Sector 47 interference persists. No visual markers. suggest underground installation. The phrase Sector 47 reappears across several unrelated intelligence assessments over the following decade, always in reference to Siberian no-fly areas. What strengthens Zakharov's credibility are fragments later recovered from the Soviet archives during the chaotic Yeltsin years. Among the leaked papers was a typed directive from the Ministry of Defense, dated 1951, addressed to the Scientific Research Institute No. 88, better known as the cradle of the Soviet missile program. The document requested evaluation of magnetic field energy extraction apparatus, foreign origin, transferred from Unit 47, Tunguska sector. Attached was a schematic diagram annotated in German, bearing the title Energiekammer Typ B. The same phrase appears in British naval intelligence notes from Operation Vellum, the salvage of the Baltic convoy Eisenwind. It was the first tangible link between the lost Nazi shipment and the Siberian experiments. Unit 47's records were methodically scrubbed from Soviet registries after 1952, yet anomalies persist. In 1967, a classified Soviet geophysical survey detected residual heat pockets beneath permafrost layers in Tunguska, inexplicable by geological means. When Western scientists later gained access to satellite imagery after 1991, they identified concentric scorch marks consistent with high-energy discharges. The Russian Academy of Sciences dismissed the findings as remnants of wartime munitions tests. Independent researchers disagreed, pointing out that the soil composition showed traces of melted silica and microscopic iron spheres, signatures identical to those found at the 1908 Tunguska event. The mystery deepened when, in 1995, a retired Russian railway engineer named Pavel Drozdov published a memoir describing his wartime assignment, escorting sealed cargo trains east. Drozdov wrote that his convoy carried unfamiliar machinery, guarded by men with NKVD insignia. They spoke little, even among themselves, he recalled. Every crate was stamped with a double-headed eagle overlaid by a swastika. We were told it was German machinery for electrical power, yet the guards avoided it as if it were cursed. His route logs, verified by surviving Soviet transport records, match the path leading toward the Tunguska region. Modern Russian researchers continue to deny that Unit 47 ever existed, but the fragments tell a different story. In 2011, a small research team from Novosibirsk University obtained soil samples from an area west of the stony Tunguska River, soil that emitted faint residual radiation decades after any known nuclear activity. The team's findings were quietly suppressed. Their funding was withdrawn, and their report, Magnetothermal Anomalies in Central Siberia, was removed from scientific journals within months. Perhaps the most haunting detail lies in a recovered communication from the late 1940s, preserved in Zakharov's archive, typed on onion skin paper, stamped Sovershенно Sekretno, top secret. It bears a chilling line from Colonel Alexeyev to his superior. "We are no longer studying their machines. We are continuing their work. The device breathes when activated. It responds to field shifts like a living thing." Whether metaphor or madness, that statement encapsulates the terror and fascination that defined the Soviet obsession with Nazi technology. The Siberian files remain sealed. Officially, no trace of Unit 47 exists, and all materials pertaining to Operation Morgenstern were incinerated in 1953. Yet the pattern of deletions and overlapping references across multiple nations suggests deliberate coordination. Too many names disappear at the same moment in history: Koltsov, Alexeyev, Zakharov himself. His death in 1980, ruled an accident on the A2 motorway near Vienna, came just weeks after he told Western journalists he intended to publish the second half of the photographs. His hotel room was later found ransacked and his negatives vanished. Only 3 images survive, preserved in microfiche copies: a frozen pit, a steel cylinder, and a sign in Cyrillic reading simply, "Object sealed by order of state." Somewhere beneath the endless Siberian forest, under meters of ice and earth, lies the tomb of Unit 47's experiment, whatever it truly was. The area remains off-limits to civilians, guarded under the pretext of environmental hazard. Yet satellites continue to register faint thermal irregularities from the coordinates once marked as Zone 47. The taiga conceals its scars well, but every so often, the permafrost releases a low, hollow resonance, an echo through the ground that local hunters call the breathing earth. No one ventures near it after dark. Chapter 4. The Vatican Intercepts. Operation Paper Veil. In the chaotic months following the Allied occupation of Italy in 1946, a flood of fugitives and former collaborators streamed southward through the ruins of Europe. Among them were the remnants of Germany's scientific elite, engineers, physicians, and technicians who had served the Third Reich's most secret projects. The world knows this exodus by the name Operation Paperclip, an American intelligence effort to acquire Nazi expertise before the Soviets could. But buried beneath the Vatican's diplomatic cables lies evidence of a parallel network, one not operated by any government but by the Holy See itself. This hidden extraction effort, codenamed Paper Veil by MI6 cryptographers, remains one of the least understood conduits of the post-war era. In early 1946, British monitoring stations at GCHQ began intercepting unusual encrypted traffic on Vatican radio's diplomatic frequencies. The messages, transmitted from Rome to consulates in Buenos Aires and Santiago, appeared at first to be routine ecclesiastical correspondence, but the encryption pattern was military, Type-X-level substitution with double transposition keys. When the signals were decrypted months later, analysts uncovered a disturbing vocabulary: refugees of technical skill, ecclesiastical convoy, transport via Genoa under protection. The transmission logs referenced coded identifiers matching known SS scientists previously listed as missing or presumed captured. One message, dated March 2, 1946, made direct mention of assets from Peenemünde West awaiting clerical processing. MI6 analysts assigned the file the provisional codename Paper Veil. The Vatican's Secretariat of State had long maintained a humanitarian office known as the Pontificia Commissione di Assistenza. Officially, its purpose was to aid displaced persons and POWs. Unofficially, as the intercepts indicated, it had become a discreet pipeline through which former SS and Gestapo personnel could flee Europe. Priests sympathetic to the anti-communist cause forged baptismal records and Red Cross identity cards, facilitating safe passage to Argentina, Chile, and occasionally the Middle East. But what distinguished the Paper Veil operation from other ratlines was the caliber of its passengers. Several were tied not to military units but to the Reich's scientific directorates, specifically the Heereswaffenamt and Ahnenerbe Forschungsstätte. Their expertise extended into aerodynamics, chemical propulsion, and more ominously, human experimentation. In 1953, declassified British files revealed that Vatican transmissions contained repeated references to material of energy potential. A March 1947 cable from the Nunciature in Genoa described a shipment of sealed cylinders and documents entrusted to the custody of Saint Luke. These items were to be escorted under sign of faith to a Port Authority agent named Frater. Leon, MI6 cross-checked Genoa manifests for that week and found records of a small freighter, San Giorgio II, departing for Buenos Aires carrying ecclesiastical relief equipment. None of its cargo was ever inspected. 4 weeks later, Argentina's intelligence service noted the unexplained arrival of a German national, Dr. Ernst Mertens, formerly of the Reich's V weapons program, now registered as Ernesto Marini under a Vatican-issued travel certificate. When this pattern was brought to the attention of Allied command in 1947, political sensitivities prevented any public action. The Vatican was, after all, a sovereign entity, and neither Washington nor London sought confrontation with the Church. Instead, the British quietly continued intercepting transmissions, compiling hundreds of partial decrypts. Many used the phrase Project Sanctum. Its meaning remains obscure, though one fragment suggested it referred to the preservation of superior knowledge. Another, dated July 1948, referenced designs for atmospheric lift propulsion, destined for a southern benefactor. The implication was chilling. Vatican channels were being used to traffic not only personnel but classified technology. The mystery might have faded into obscurity if not for the strange disappearance of an archivist named Don Pietro Santini in 1963, employed in the Apostolic Archives. Santini reportedly discovered a carbon copy of a Paper Veil transmission while cataloguing wartime documents. The message, stamped Nunciatura Apostolica, Genova, 1946, contained diagrams resembling turbine schematics and bearing signatures of two former Peenemünde engineers. Days after he attempted to contact an Italian journalist, Santini vanished. His apartment was found stripped bare, his typewriter missing, his notes gone. The only item left behind was a single microfilm reel labeled X45. Witnesses said plainclothesmen claiming to be from the Carabinieri arrived hours before the disappearance. Yet no such operation was recorded. The case remains unsolved. Rumors surrounding the X45 microfilm grew over time. A copy surfaced briefly in 1972 during an investigative program on Rai television. The images, shown for only seconds before being cut, appeared to depict blueprints stamped with both the Reichsadler and a papal seal. A Vatican spokesman immediately denounced the footage as forgery. Within weeks, the original film and its negatives were confiscated under a state order citing national moral protection. The journalist responsible, Gianni Lombardi, later claimed he received threats from anonymous callers instructing him to forget the name Paper Veil. He died of a heart attack the following year at 39. British records released under the 30-year rule shed faint light on what happened next. MI6's Vatican desk compiled a final assessment in 1955 concluding that at least 30 high-value German scientists had escaped via clerical rat lines. The report included one especially sensitive appendix describing transfers of advanced propulsion schematics to South American facilities connected to both church and industrial benefactors. The appendix was later removed from circulation. An internal note added in 1957 reads, "Source: Paper Veil cables. Location of original blueprints unknown. Continue monitoring Argentine and Chilean ecclesiastical shipments." It is the last known official mention of the code name. In 1987, historian Dr. Lucas Meyer gained rare access to Vatican diplomatic archives while researching post-war humanitarian routes. Among the inventories, he found references to sealed correspondences regarding scientific asylum. The files were bound under red ribbon and marked with an unfamiliar sigil, two overlapping keys enclosing the letters PV. Before Meyer could request reproduction rights, access was revoked and his credentials withdrawn. He described the incident later as being escorted out by men who were not clergy. His research notes, subsequently stolen from his car, were never recovered. There remains one surviving trace of Paper Veil in modern intelligence literature. An MI6 briefing note declassified in 2004, summarizing post-war Vatican communications. It contains a single haunting paragraph. Cross-reference transmissions of March-May 1946 with naval cargo records of Eisenwind and subsequent vellum recovery. Patterns of nomenclature identical. Probability of coordination between German and Vatican channels, 82%. If this assessment holds any truth, it implies that the Church may have served as intermediary in moving not just people, but elements of the same secret research connected to the vanished Baltic convoy. Even today, the Vatican refuses all comment on Paper Veil. Requests to review wartime archives are routinely denied under the justification of protecting personal dignity. Within Rome, whispers persist of a hidden repository known as the Archivio Nero, the Black Archive, housing correspondence too compromising for the Apostolic Archive's official record. Access, they say, requires direct papal consent. No such authorization has ever been granted to secular investigators. Somewhere within the labyrinth of those sealed vaults, behind leaded doors and coded shelves, may lie the unredacted truth. Telegrams that tie the world's oldest spiritual institution to the survival of the Reich's most forbidden knowledge. In public, the Church remains silent. In the archives, the pages remain untouched, but the intercepts endure. The cold, mechanical proof that for a brief and terrible period, salvation and secrecy shared the same frequency. Chapter 5: The Alpine Bunker and the Black Archive. By late April 1945, Germany was dying by the hour. Allied armour was converging from the west, the Red Army closing from the east, and the once imperial heart of Europe had become a labyrinth of retreat orders and desperate last stands. In the Bavarian Alps, where myth and command still clung together, the SS had established a final refuge, an underground complex beneath the Zugspitze Massif, the highest peak in Germany. Officially, it was a weather observation post. In truth, it was Bunker 12A, a fortified vault designed to contain the Reich's most sensitive archives and experimental research. According to the few surviving field orders, its contents were designated Schwarz Archive, the Black Archive. Contemporary German documents about Bunker 12A are almost non-existent. The first credible mention appears in a Luftwaffe engineering memo dated February 6, 1945, referencing the transfer of critical research materials to Oberkommando Site 12A, Zone Süd. The memo bears the initials H. Kammler. SS Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler, chief of the Sonderstab Kammler, had overseen construction of secret weapons facilities across the Reich, including the V2 program. In the chaos of Germany's collapse, Kammler disappeared, officially presumed dead, yet scattered intelligence notes, British, American and Soviet alike, hint that he orchestrated a final transfer of advanced research before vanishing into the mountains. By the first week of May 1945, US forces of the 10th Armored Division advanced toward Garmisch-Partenkirchen, sweeping through Alpine villages littered with fleeing SS detachments. Local interrogations conducted under Operation Dustbin revealed persistent rumors of an underground depot near the Eibsee Lake, accessible through a network of railway tunnels. American patrols searching the area discovered fresh concrete works, steel blast doors, and a complex ventilation system carved into the rock. Yet when engineers attempted to enter, the tunnel mouth was rigged with explosives. At 0320 hours on May 6th, a controlled detonation collapsed the entryway before it could be breached. A US Army report dated May 10, 1945, records the event laconically. Objective inaccessible, secondary access undetermined. Materials relocated, see classified annex. The classified annex referred to is still sealed, but traces of what might have been inside the bunker surfaced in an inventory compiled weeks later by the US Technical Industrial Intelligence Committee, TIIC. The list included scientific materials of unknown classification, origin Obersalzberg region. Several crates bore the SS insignia overprinted with the letters BA, believed to stand for Black Archive. Within those crates, according to marginal notes from a French liaison officer, were reels of microfilm, sealed envelopes, and a quantity of unlabeled metallurgical components. The shipments were transported under armed escort to Innsbruck, then disappeared into US custody. What became of Kammler remains one of the great unanswered questions of the war. In 1946, an OSS field memo from Munich claimed that Subject K had been seen in the custody of American officers near Mittenwald, assisting in technical debriefings. A year later, the CIA inherited several of these case files under its paperclip annex program. Among the folders was a document titled Technical Priorities, Operation Blacklist. Within, investigators found a reference to archival consolidation from Zugspitze facility, data now secured. The phrasing echoed earlier British notes regarding the Baltic recovery known as Operation Vellum. Across theatres, the same hand seemed to guide the same pattern: concealment, relocation and silence. In 1958, long after the bunker had faded into rumour, an Austrian mountaineer named Karl Ebner stumbled upon a section of exposed rock high above the Eibsee, where the ice had retreated. Behind a wall of compacted snow, he found the edge of a sealed blast door, half buried under debris. The metal was stamped with the SS runes and a serial marking, Sonderstab Kammler, Object 12A. Ebner photographed the discovery and notified local authorities. Within 48 hours, the Bundeswehr cordoned off the area under environmental hazard pretext. Days later, an explosion, officially attributed to unstable wartime ordnance, obliterated the site. When investigators returned, the passage had collapsed completely. Ebner's photographs were confiscated and never returned. Over the following decades, stray references to the Black Archive appeared in declassified NATO correspondence. A 1962 memorandum from the US Army's European Command Intelligence Division mentioned archival transfers from Alpine storage, contents, advanced propulsion, biomedical experimentation, cryptologic research. Another entry from 1964 referred cryptically to reintegrated files of SS Archive Kammler, now under Directive Aurora. No explanation was provided for Aurora, but the term later surfaced in aerospace research budgets related to experimental high-altitude craft, suggesting that whatever data had been buried beneath the mountain might have been repurposed for Cold War technologies. There are darker theories. In 1982, a former US intelligence translator named Harold Lenz claimed He had seen fragments of the Zugspitze files while stationed in Frankfurt in the 1950s. He described diagrams depicting biological endurance subjects and psychophysical interface testing. His statements were dismissed as conspiracy, yet they align disturbingly with recovered SS medical documentation labeled Project Lebensfeldgerät, a rumored attempt to explore human resistance to high-energy fields. The files vanished after 1945. The Black Archive, it seems, was not only a technical repository but also a burial ground for evidence the Allies preferred never to surface. In 1994, an independent research group using ground-penetrating radar near the Ybbsee detected a large subterranean void approximately 60 meters below the surface. The anomaly, roughly rectangular, measured 45 by 25 meters, consistent with a reinforced chamber. When the team applied for excavation rights, Bavarian authorities denied the request, citing geological instability. A week later, their equipment was confiscated for licensing irregularities. The lead geophysicist, Dr. Ingrid Voss, later reported anonymous calls warning her to abandon the project. She moved to Canada within months and refused further interviews. Several documents link the Black Archive to concurrent Vatican communications under paper veil. A US Army intelligence crossbrief dated August 1947 notes, possible extraction of archival duplicates by clerical intermediaries prior to bunker destruction. This suggests that portions of the material, scientific or otherwise, escaped before the Zugspitze site was sealed. Supporting this theory, Italian customs ledgers from 1946 record wooden chests bearing ecclesiastical insignia shipped from Innsbruck to Genoa via the Franciscan Relief Mission. The cargo listed only as donated technical materials for reconstruction. The timing coincides exactly with the disappearance of several SS scientists later located in Argentina. Whatever the Black Archive contained, its erasure was deliberate. In 2001, a classified NATO environmental survey of the Zugspitze region, ostensibly measuring soil contamination, reported anomalous subsurface ferrous readings inconsistent with geological composition. The data was removed from subsequent publications. Two of the scientists involved later admitted anonymously that they were instructed to classify their findings under heritage protection. Eyewitnesses, official files, and redacted memos form a lattice of half-truths, enough to outline the shape of something vast and hidden, but never enough to reveal its face. A final clue surfaces in a faded 1955 memo attributed to the CIA's Technical Services Division. The document, retrieved by a researcher in 2017, reads, "Archival integration complete. Zugspitze material classified to level 7. Maintain cover narrative. No such facility." Level 7 corresponded to projects involving weapons research deemed beyond contemporary ethical oversight. Some believe the Black Archive contained the Reich's terminal records, proof of atrocities the Allies chose to bury to prevent a political crisis. Others insist it held prototypes and theoretical work decades ahead of its time. Whatever truth lies buried beneath the mountain has been guarded by more than stone. It has been entombed by the will of nations. On quiet nights in the Bavarian valleys, locals claim to hear distant reverberations from the glaciers, low, hollow booms, echoing as if from deep within the rock. Geologists dismiss them as ice fractures, but old shepherds remember the explosions of May 1945 and whisper that the mountain itself was sealed alive. Whether by design or chance, Zugspitze keeps its secret well. Beneath its frozen veins lies the last breath of a fallen empire, locked in darkness and silence, a tomb not just of men, but of the knowledge they were never meant to possess. For decades, historians have treated these scattered threads, the vanished convoy, the silent unit, the Siberian files, the Vatican intercepts, the Alpine bunker, as coincidences, unrelated fragments of a war too vast for total comprehension. Yet as newly declassified cables and rediscovered microfilms surface, the patterns begin to converge. Each operation, each missing name, each unexplained cargo points toward a single, invisible architecture of secrecy, stretching from the dying Reich to the birth of the Cold War. Somewhere beneath layers of denial and diplomacy lies the connective tissue of it all, a transnational effort to preserve knowledge that should have perished with its creators. The archives are still sealed, the witnesses gone, the evidence buried beneath decades of obfuscation, but the signals remain, faint yet insistent. And until the final page of the Black Archive is unearthed, the Second World War may never truly have ended.